What if the gentle giant who stole hearts on the Ponderosa carried scars so deep they never made it to the screen? You remember Hoss Cartwright, 6'4", 300 pounds of kindness wrapped in a 10-gallon hat, the guy who could calm a stampede with a grin. But the man behind the hat, Dan Blocker, lived a life that would have made any Bonanza script look tame. He was born the biggest baby in Texas history, fought on a frozen hill in Korea where his size nearly got him killed, and walked away from a fortune in football to chase a dream most people laughed at. He built an empire selling steaks with his own face on the box, then quietly gave millions to kids no one else noticed. He moved his family to Switzerland just to breathe without cameras. And in the end, a routine surgery took him at 43, right when the world thought he was invincible. The devastating truth isn't just that he's gone. It's that we never really knew the weight he carried every single day. But to understand the man behind Hoss, we start where it all began.
December 10th, 1928, in the dusty little town of DeKalb, Texas, a 14-pound baby boy comes into the world, the largest ever recorded in Bowie County. Nurses whisper that Ora Blocker's grocery store might need bigger scales just to weigh him. They name him Bobby Dan Davis Blocker, but everyone shortens it to Dan. 4 years later, the Great Depression hits hard. The family packs up and heads west to O'Donnell, a cotton patch town where dust storms choke the sky and hope runs thinner than the soup on the table. Ora opens another store, but customers pay with promises more than pennies. Young Dan learns early what hunger feels like, not just in his stomach, but in the worried lines on his father's face. He grows fast, too fast. By age 6, he's already taller than the school principal. Kids call him the walking barn door. One spring afternoon on the playground, a swing chain snaps. Dan flies face first into the metal pole. 2 front teeth, gone forever. From that day on, he wears dentures, a secret he guards like buried treasure. The gap-toothed smile we loved on television? Pure Hollywood magic. The real Dan never smiled wide in photographs unless the camera caught him off guard. Football becomes his escape. At O'Donnell High, he's a one-man wrecking crew, flattening opponents like tumbleweeds. Scouts from the University of Texas come calling, but Sul Ross State offers a full ride and a drama department. Dan chooses the stage over the stadium, graduating in 1950 with a degree nobody back home understands. He teaches English and coaches linebackers in Sonora, Texas, then heads to New Mexico for the same double life. Summers, he acts in outdoor theaters, sleeping in his car to save gas money. Friends tell him he's crazy, 6'4", 300 pounds, and he wants to be Hamlet. Dan just laughs and keeps driving west. Those early knocks toughened him, but nothing prepared him for the real battlefield ahead.
December 25th, 1951. Dan Blocker, 23 years old and built like a freight train, kisses his new bride goodbye and ships out to Korea with the 45th Infantry Division. First Sergeant Blocker, they call him, because even the Army can't ignore a man who fills a doorway sideways. They send him to the front lines, straight to a frozen ridge called Pork Chop Hill. The name sounds harmless until you're there. Sub-zero nights, Chinese artillery screaming overhead, and foxholes so shallow Dan has to fold himself like a lawn chair just to fit. Bullets don't care how big you are, but the cold does. Dan's knees jam against the dirt wall every time he crouches. His back screams from the weight of the radio pack, the machine gun, the extra ammo belts the smaller guys can't carry. One night a mortar round lands 10 feet away. The blast throws him clear, but the impact jars something deep in his spine. He never tells the medics. Just a bruise, he grunts and keeps moving. By the time the hill changes hands for the 3rd time, Dan has dragged 3 wounded soldiers to safety, one under each arm and one across his shoulders. The men start calling him Hoss long before Bonanza ever exists. He comes home in 1953 with a chest full of ribbons and a spine full of steel pins he never mentions. The nightmares follow anyway. The crack of sniper fire, the smell of burning diesel, the kid from Oklahoma who didn't make it out of the trench. Dan buries it all under lesson plans and whistle blows. He teaches high school in Carlsbad, New Mexico, pacing the classroom like a caged bear, reciting Shakespeare between football drills. The students love him because he never yells. He just leans in close and speaks soft enough to make you listen. But every November, when the first cold snap hits, he walks the hallways gripping his lower back, eyes fixed on something 1,000 miles away. Surviving that forged the heart we saw on screen, but Hollywood would test it in ways bullets never could.
1956. Los Angeles hums with neon and broken dreams. Dan Blocker rolls into town with a master's degree in dramatic arts and $200 in his pocket. He signs up for PhD classes at UCLA, but the pull of the soundstage is stronger than any textbook. He drops out after one semester and starts knocking on casting doors. The first agent takes one look and laughs. "Kid, you're a mountain with a mustache. You'll play bouncers and bar brawlers until you're gray." Dan shrugs, pockets the rejection, and heads to the next office. Bit parts trickle in. He's the silent thug in a Colt 45 episode, the lumberjack who loses a fight to Cheyenne Bodie, the deputy who gets knocked cold by the rifleman. Between takes, he pumps iron in a downtown gym and rides broncs in weekend rodeos to pay rent. One producer tells him to lose 50 pounds if he ever wants a speaking line. Dan smiles, orders a double cheeseburger, and keeps showing up. He sleeps in his Plymouth station wagon more nights than he cares to count, the back seat folded flat under a cowboy blanket. Friends back in Texas send postcards. "Come home, teach, coach, live normal." Dan writes back on diner napkins. Normal doesn't cast giants. By 1958, he's 30, broke, and tired of being scenery. He auditions for a new Western called Bonanza. The script calls Haas Cartwright a big, dumb Swede who trips over his own feet. Dan reads the lines in full cowboy gear, hat, boots, the works, and then tosses the pages aside. He improvises a quiet moment where Haas comforts a scared colt, voice low, eyes gentle. The room goes still. Producer David Dortort leans forward. "That's not the clown we wrote." Dan answers, "Good. Clowns don't last 14 seasons. They hire him on the spot, but the real fight is just starting." Then came the role that changed everything and nearly broke him in the process.
September 1959. The Bonanza set at Paramount Ranch smells of pine and horse sweat. Dan Blocker steps onto the Ponderosa for the first time, 6'4" frame dwarfing the false front saloon. The original Hoss was meant to be comic relief, a stumbling ox in a white hat who existed to make Little Joe look clever. Dan refuses the gag. Between takes, he corners the writers. Give him a brain and a heart or I walk. They laugh until the dailies come back. Viewers write letters by the thousands. Hoss is the soul of the show. The writers cave. Hoss starts quoting poetry, calming wild stallions with a whisper, standing up to land barons with quiet steel. Dan's fingerprints are on every script. Off camera, the machine revs up. Bonanza explodes into America's living rooms every Sunday night. By season 3, Dan is pulling in fan mail that fills a mailbag the size of a feed sack. Producers slap his face on lunchboxes, coloring books, even a chain of Bonanza steakhouse restaurants that opens its first location in 1963. Dan signs the papers, pockets the royalties, then hates every commercial where he has to grin and say, "Come get your Haas-sized T-bone." He tells his wife Dolphia, "I'm selling beef with my own mug. Feels like auctioning off pieces of myself." The chain grows to over 600 locations, turning him into a multi-millionaire almost overnight. He wires money home to Texas teachers, buys his parents a ranch. But the cameras never stop. Reporters camp outside his Encino home. Autograph hounds tail his kids to school. He pushes back the only way he knows how. He insists Haas never kills unless the story demands it. He demands the show film in color even when NBC balks at the cost. He mentors young actors on set, slipping $20 bills to grips who complain about 12-hour days. Michael Landon calls him the conscience of the Ponderosa. But every Friday when the rap bell rings, Dan limps to his dressing room, back screaming from old war wounds and new stunt falls. He swallows the pain with a grin because giants aren't supposed to complain. Fame brought fortune, but at what personal price? The family he built reveals the real cost.
1952. Dan meets Dolphia Lee Parker at a Sul Ross College mixer. She's studying speech therapy, sharp as a tack, and the only girl on campus who doesn't flinch when he fills the doorway. They marry that August in a little white church in Carlsbad, New Mexico, with 200 guests and one photographer who keeps asking Dan to stand back so we can see the bride. Dolphia laughs and pulls him closer. 4 kids arrive in quick succession. David in 1953, twins Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn in 1955, and Dirk in 1957. Every name starts with D, a private joke that becomes family law. The spotlight tightens. By 1967, Bonanza is the #1 show in the world, and the Blockers can't buy groceries without flashbulbs popping. Dan loads the station wagon and moves the entire clan to Vevey, Switzerland, a quiet village on Lake Geneva where the only English on TV is Bonanza dubbed into German. Locals call him the Big American and leave him alone. The kids attend Swiss schools, learn to ski and speak French before they master long division. Dolphia plants roses along a stone wall and tells reporters, "We came for the air, stayed for the silence." Rumors swirled back home. Tax exile, secret divorce, Hollywood burnout. Dan lets them swirl. He mails postcards to Lorne Green. Tell the network the Ponderosa looks better from 3,000 miles away. Money still flows. He wires anonymous checks to a rundown shelter in East Los Angeles, the Guyot Foundation Home for Girls. Staff think the donor is a studio exec until one Christmas, a crate of toys arrives with a handwritten note from a guy who was once the biggest kid in town. Dan never visits in daylight. He flies in under cover of night, unloads the truck himself, and vanishes before dawn. He funds college scholarships for teachers' kids, pays medical bills for extras who broke legs on set, and still gripes to Dolphia that $500,000 a week feels obscene. She reminds him the checks cash either way. The kids grow up watching their father on a 12-inch screen in a language they barely understand. Dirk, the youngest, asks why Papa Haas never comes home for dinner. Dan kneels, eye level for once, and says, because the real Haas has homework to check and roses to water. But the distance carves quiet lines around his eyes. Letters from the States pile up, ratings slipping, scripts thinning, NBC breathing down necks. Dan flies back for table reads, kisses the family goodbye at Geneva Airport, and promises it's only for a month. The months stretch into seasons. He gave everything to others, but his body finally rebelled in the cruelest way.
May 12, 1972. The hospital smells of bleach and burnt coffee. Dan Blocker checks in for what the doctors call routine gallbladder surgery, the kind of fix thousands of men walk away from every year. He jokes with the nurse about needing an extra-long gurney, kisses Dolphia in the hallway, and tells her to pick up the kids from school so they don't worry. The anesthesia mask slips over his face at 10 in the morning. By 2 o'clock, the surgeon steps out smiling, says everything went textbook. Dan wakes groggy, cracks a weak grin, and asks for ice chips. Then, the clot moves. A blood clot, no bigger than a dime, breaks loose from a vein in his leg and rockets through his heart into the main artery of his lungs. The monitors scream, nurses sprint, doctors pump his chest until ribs crack like kindling. At 3:47, the line flattens. Dan Blocker, 43 years old, is gone. The gentle giant who could lift a calf with one arm and quiet a soundstage with a look dies on a stainless steel table in Los Angeles County General. The news hits the Ponderosa set like a dynamite blast. Lorne Greene locks himself in his trailer and doesn't come out for 2 days. Pernell Roberts, already halfway out the door, cancels his resignation and stays for the funeral. Michael Landon, the toughest kid on the ranch, cries in wardrobe while a seamstress pins a black armband on his vest. NBC executives scramble. They can't replace Haas. The audience won't swallow a new face in the white hat. Instead, Landon rewrites the season 14 premiere overnight. The episode, titled Forever, airs that September. Little Joe reads a letter from a friend lost at sea. The camera lingers on an empty chair at the dinner table. No one says the name, but every viewer knows. Ratings collapse anyway. Without the heart of the show, Bonanza limps through half a season and dies in January 1973. 16 years later, the made-for-TV movie, Bonanza: The Next Generation, gives Haas a fictional send-off. He drowns, saving a woman from a swollen river. Fans mail NBC death threats. Dirk Blocker, now 29 and acting himself, watches the scene and mutters, "Dad would have hated the melodrama." The truth is simpler and harder. A routine surgery, a hidden clot, and a life cut short when the world still needed its Haas. Haas may have left the Ponderosa, but his spirit lingers in ways we can't ignore.
Dan Blocker left the world at 43, but the ripples never stopped. The Ponderosa Gate still creaks in the wind at Paramount Ranch, now a state park where tourists snap selfies beside the charred remains of the Cartwright house, burned in the 2018 Woolsey fire. Yet the foundation stones spell out the family name like a gravestone. Every year on May 13th, a single white Stetson appears on the fence post. No note, no flowers, just the hat. Park rangers say it's been happening since 1973. They leave it until the wind takes it. Dirk Blocker, the youngest, carries the heaviest piece. He was 14 when the call came. 50 years later, in a 2024 podcast, he finally spoke the sentence he rehearsed in his head for decades. "I never got to say goodbye to the man, only to the character." He plays Detective Hitchcock on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, cracking jokes in a squad room, but when fans ask about Bonanza, he goes quiet, eyes fixed on the floor. Dirk keeps his father's war medals in a cigar box under the bed. He opens it once a year, on Christmas, the day Dan shipped out to Korea. The ribbons are faded, the bronze dulled, but the weight is the same. Daughters Deborah and Donna chose the shadows. They live within 20 miles of each other in Southern California, raise grandkids, and still sign Christmas cards with a simple D, no last names. Dolphia, 92 as of 2025, tends roses in the same Vevey garden where Dan once pushed the twins on a tire swing. She tells visitors the lake hasn't changed, but the silence is louder now. Every spring, she mails a check to the Gaio Foundation Home for Girls, amount undisclosed, return address blank. The shelter renamed its library the Dan Blocker Wing in 1990, but the plaque carries no photo, just the words, "For the children who need a giant." A 2025 X thread went viral, claiming Dan's surgery was botched on purpose to kill the show's budget. Pure fiction, but it trended for 3 days. The family never responds. They don't need to. The truth sits in a quiet cemetery in DeKalb, Texas, under a headstone that reads, "He made people laugh and feel safe." Walk into any Bonanza steakhouse still open. There are 9 left, and the hostess will point to a framed photo behind the bar. Dan in the white hat, arm around a 10-year-old customer, both grinning over a sizzling platter. The chain filed for bankruptcy in 2001, but franchisees keep the picture dusted. One owner in Oklahoma told a reporter, "We sell steaks, but people come for the memory." On slow Tuesday nights, the jukebox still plays the Bonanza theme. Regulars raise a glass to the empty stool at the end of the counter.
Dan Blocker never saw the internet age, never knew his gentle giant would outlive color television itself. He wanted to be remembered as a teacher who got lucky, not an icon. Yet every time a kid watches Hoss Cartwright talk a bully into putting down a gun, or sees Dirk Blocker nail a punchline on a sitcom, the lesson lands. Kindness at 300 pounds is still kindness. The devastating truth isn't the clot or the surgery or the ratings collapse. It's that we lost a man who proved you can carry war in your bones, fame on your back, and still have room to lift someone else up. Next time you rewatch an old episode, notice the way Hoss pauses before he speaks, the way his eyes soften when a child is scared. That wasn't acting. That was Dan Blocker, 43 years young, already knowing the clock was ticking, choosing to spend every second making the world a little less lonely. What hidden giants walk among us right now, carrying loads we'll only understand when they're gone? Maybe the question isn't what happened to Hoss. Maybe it's what Hoss would ask of you. If you felt that tug in your chest watching Dan's story unfold, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell. We're diving deep into more retro legends every week on Retro Celeb Talk. Drop a like if Hoss was your favorite Cartwright, and comment below, which forgotten star should we uncover next? Your pick might just become our next heartbreaking reveal. See you in the comments, partners.